Hello everyone, my name is Laura or King Dickens. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my November wrap up. Overall in November, I had an okay reading month. I read 8 books, which I'm very happy with, but I didn't enjoy a lot of what I read. So unfortunately my least favourite was one that I was not expecting to dislike. I didn't think I'd love it as much as her other books, but I was not expecting to give it the rating that I did. It was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Instead of reading my physical copy, I listened to the audiobook on Scribd. So Sense and Sensibility is about 2 older sisters in a family who have to move from their home because their father passes away, and it is instantly given to their half-brother. And he's married, he has kids, so they have to move out and they have to find somewhere else. So the whole family, their mother, the 2 older sisters and their younger sister, have to move and majorly downsize to this little cottage by the sea. Our main 2 sisters are Eleanor and Marianne. Marianne is the younger of the 2. She falls in love with a young man. She's completely romanticized her life and it's just full of make-believe, whereas our older sister, Eleanor, is very realistic. She's the complete opposite to Marianne. She's been in love with a man for years called Edward, and it just doesn't really seem like there's any chance of that happening. And she's very strict with herself and doesn't really allow herself to believe that it'll ever happen, unlike Marianne, who the second she sees her love interest, she's instantly planning their wedding. It's really interesting to see the contrast between the 2 sisters. That is one thing that I really enjoyed, but there wasn't really much else that I liked. This is my 4th Jane Austen book this year. I've read Pride and Prejudice, Persuasion and Northanger Abbey, my favourite being Northanger Abbey, my least favourite being Persuasion. I didn't really have any problems with this, like I didn't have any issues with it. I just felt so bored and I couldn't wait for it to end. I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars, but my rating might go up after a reread in the future. The next book that I read in November was Felix Ever After by Case and Callender. Our main character in Felix Ever After is Felix. He is a black transgender queer boy. He feels very lost in life and feels like he hasn't had the same experiences at his age that all the other kids at his age have had, like first kiss, first love, etc, etc. Very early on in the novel, Felix starts receiving anonymous transphobic messages from someone in school, and they also, whoever this person is, releases his dead name to the whole school and pictures of him before he transitioned, and is basically trying to ruin his life because he's transgender. Throughout the novel we're trying to figure out who did this, who is this person that is sending him all these messages. We also have a love triangle in here, but my favourite part of the story, definitely what I enjoyed the most about Felix Ever After, was Felix's journey, kind of getting to know himself and trying to figure out his goals in life, what he wants for his future. I really enjoy that. I always love kind of reading coming of age stories or kind of just stories of finding yourself. I don't really have anything I would say negative to say. It's just there were some things that kind of let me down, that brought the book down for me. As a whole, when I first started reading this, I was really enjoying it, and for the first half of the book I was considering giving it a 4 or 5 star, or maybe around a 4.5. And then just the love triangle just didn't interest me. It brought it down for me. The romance in here, I just feel like it was underdeveloped and it didn't give me what I wanted. I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I do highly recommend it if you would like to read about identity. If you want to read about someone coming to terms with who they are and feeling proud of who they are, I would highly recommend that you pick this up, because that part of the story is written so well. I think Felix as a character and what he goes through as a person, I think was written really well. It was just the love triangle and kind of the second half of the plot that fell flat for me personally, but I think that this book is a fantastic asset to the LGBTQIA+ community. It taught me a lot that I had never read of before, and I highly recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. So my next book was None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney. In None Shall Sleep, we are in 1982, Quantico, Virginia, following 2 main characters, Emma and Travis. They are both teenagers who have been recruited by the FBI to interview teenage serial killers in order to understand their minds and in order to prevent further murders from happening in the area. The first thing that I have to say is I really enjoyed, probably the main thing that I really enjoyed, or more than enjoyed, appreciated, was that it was very clear that Ellie Marney did her research. I think it was also written really well, but I found it extremely unrealistic, to the point where I nearly just wanted to put it down. When I first heard of this book, the idea of the FBI recruiting teenagers to help them solve murder cases, I did think, what? That would never happen. As I started reading, in the very beginning, I thought, okay, it doesn't make sense, but I can kind of go with it. But as we kept going, it just kept getting more and more unrealistic. When you're writing like a fiction book set in the real world, I want it to be realistic. I want to believe, yeah, this could happen. And then the thing that bothered me the most was that this is a story set in the 80s. I would never have known that if it wasn't told on the inside of the dust jacket. This says on the inside, 1982, Quantico, Virginia, in big writing, and I would never have been able to tell you that it was set in the 80s. My favorite music, my favorite films, all that fun stuff, all my favorite influences come from the 80s. I was expecting to see that in here, and I didn't at all. So I was let down. I was really let down by that. If there was a sequel, I would give it a go. I would definitely give it a go. It kind of seemed like at the end that it was kind of left open if she wanted to continue the series or to make it into a series, but I would want improvements made. There's a fly. That's Fluff. Oh, I think I gave this a 3.75 out of 5 stars. Next, I read a story that really surprised me. I kind of had a feeling that I would like it, but I didn't realize that I would like it and get it as much as I did. And the story is Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. Okay. This book is asking the question, what would Hillary Clinton's life have been like if she hadn't married Bill Clinton? First thing that I really enjoyed about this was how accessible it was. We're given a lot of descriptions about historical events from when she was a teenager up until the 2016 election, and I found it really easy to follow. There are a lot of politicians in here, there's a lot of names thrown in here, and I was not confused. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I saw quite a few people say in their Goodreads reviews of this that didn't like it, that they didn't like reading about Hillary in a romantic sense, which I understand. It is a bit weird reading about a real life person in a fictional setting, and reading about relationships and things like that is a bit odd, but I personally didn't find it to be that way. I can understand why others would though, so just keep that in mind if you think that you'd be weirded out by that. Maybe this isn't the book for you. I really liked the pacing. I really liked reading about her as a teen, kind of starting out in law school up until the 2016 election. My stomach's making noises. I enjoyed it all. I really did. I don't have anything negative to say. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and if it sounds interesting to you, I would highly recommend it. If you like Hillary, or if you're interested in the election, even the recent election, this is fun, and it gives a lot of insight into how people that are running feel, being watched all the time. Every single move that they make, every word that they say is being studied almost. And it was really interesting to read about it kind of from Hillary's perspective, even though it's not, it's from Curtis's, but like, you know what I mean. So my next book was a memoir, and it was We Have Always Been Here by Samar Habib. It says on the side here, a queer Muslim memoir. And she really does go into detail, telling us the story of her sexuality, figuring out who she is as a person, figuring out who she is as a woman, figuring out how she fits into the Muslim community as a queer woman. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. The only reason that I only gave it a 3 was because I felt that we were kind of lacking some detail in certain areas about her as a person. I feel like we didn't get to know her very well, and I've seen a couple of other people say it much better than I did, but overall I still really enjoyed it and I got a lot out of it. I just would have wanted a bit more. So now we're getting into my top 3 favorite books of the month. So my third favorite was one that I just finished yesterday, and it was My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. My Cousin Rachel is following a young man called Philip. He was raised by his cousin Ambrose. Ambrose is after passing away, so now his estate, all of his belongings, his home, everything goes to our main character, Philip. Before Ambrose passed away, he was living in Italy with his wife Rachel. And now that Ambrose has passed, Rachel is invited to visit Philip in their home and see where she would have lived if Ambrose had survived. I don't know if I explained that very well. Philip does not want this meeting to happen. He doesn't want to meet Rachel. He kind of sees her as a villain. He sees her as the reason that his cousin, his favorite person in the world, is dead. So he's not interested in seeing her, but everyone in the village is kind of telling him, you know, you have to do it. It's just common decency. So common courtesy, common decency. For the first, I would say 75% of this, I was convinced that it was going to be one of my favorite books of all time. The reason that I only gave it a 3.75 out of 5 stars is because I really didn't like the ending. I thought it could have been way stronger, and I kind of felt how I did with Rebecca. I felt very underwhelmed, and I said overwhelmed, underwhelmed by how everything wrapped up. I loved the main character, Philip. He was grumpy, he was rude, he was childish, he was immature, he was a bit thick. He's me. Yeah, I really liked Philip. I really enjoyed him as a character. I loved his character development. You can see him mature throughout the novel, and I really appreciated that. I thought it was written really well. Yeah, it's just the ending that let me down. Everything else, who is texting me? Everything else felt very strong for me. I really loved the writing. There were some beautiful passages in here that I really enjoyed. I will definitely reread this in the future. The ending, yes, let me down, but the majority of the book was phenomenal to me. It was just the last, I'd say 70 pages that kind of flopped like a fish for me personally. Now, my second favorite book of the month was a shock to me because when I first started it, I was not feeling it. And it's a very short book, so I kind of told myself to keep going. And I still don't really know how I feel about it. I have more positive feelings towards it than negative, but I'm very confused and I'm very conflicted. And I feel like once you see what it is, if you've read this author before, you'll understand why I'm saying those things. The book is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. We Have Always Lived in the Castle is about two sisters, Mary and Constance Blackwood, Mary being the younger, Constance being the older. They live together in this old ancient house that has been on the street for years with their uncle Julian. Everyone else in their family is dead. This confused me. Her writing confused me, the storyline confused me, the characters confused me, the dialogue confused me, but I was just captivated by it. And I don't know why. I was very conflicted the whole time that I was reading it, and then I finished it and just looked back on my enjoyment and just kept thinking to myself, I couldn't put this down. Every time that I picked it up, I was addicted and I didn't know what was going on. And it's not very confusing. It's just, I didn't know why things were happening. I didn't know why the plot was going where it was going, and I didn't know why it had been where it had been. But overall, I really liked it. I've ordered The Haunting of Hill House, and I'd love to read that maybe in January, because I don't think it'll be here by December. Maybe it will, but kind of need to sit with it. Even though I finished it like 4 or 5 days ago, I'm still confused. If you are going to take any recommendations from this channel, please let this be one of them. Please let this be the one, because I loved this so much. The book is Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. So Jamaica Inn is following a young woman called Mary Ellen. Her mother is after passing. Now all of her family is dead bar one relative, her Aunt Patience. Aunt Patience lives in the Cornish moors in the middle of nowhere in an inn called Jamaica Inn with her husband Joss Marilyn. The second that Mary Ellen arrives at Jamaica Inn, she realizes that she's made a huge mistake in going there. Her aunt's husband is physically and mentally abusive. He is an alcoholic. He is just a very intimidating presence in the inn, and you can't really escape him. And so she really wants to get away from there, but she has nowhere to go because they are in the middle of nowhere. The love story in Jamaica Inn is my favorite of hers out of the 3 books that I've read so far. I just thought it was so well written. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was realistic. I thought it was well paced. I love this book. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favorite classics now. It's now one of my favorite books, and I thought it was beautiful. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 because there was one scene, or I think 2 chapters in the middle that kind of lost my interest, but then it got pulled right back in again. And I will reread this and reread this and reread this. I am 100% certain about that. I loved it and I highly recommend it. It was my favorite book of the month, like I said. I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If any of these books are on your TBR and you have any questions about them, or if you've read them and you want to have a discussion about them, message me down below or message me on Instagram or any of that fun stuff on Goodreads. Whatever you want to do, you can do. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like. And if you would like to see me talk about books in the future, if you want to subscribe, but you don't have to, it's all G. We see each other. Mary, you better be streaming Plastic Hearts on Spotify right now. Okay, bye, children of the corn.